Maria Thompson walked into the upscale boutique on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, her heels clicking softly against the polished marble floor. The store was one of those places where everything seemed to shimmer. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and racks of designer clothes stood neatly arranged like soldiers in formation. It wasn't just a shop, it was an experience, or so the advertisements claimed. But for Maria, this visit wasn't about indulgence or luxury. She needed a dress for an upcoming gala, something elegant yet understated. As she stepped inside, the air smelled faintly of expensive perfume, mixed with freshly cut flowers displayed near the entrance. A soft jazz tune played in the background, adding to the ambiance. Maria glanced around, taking in the sleek furniture and spotless mirrors that lined the walls. Everything screamed exclusivity, but there was also an unspoken tension in the atmosphere. A feeling she'd learned to recognize over years of navigating spaces not always welcoming to someone who looked like her. Maria was no stranger to these kinds of environments. As a successful FBI agent in her mid-30s, she had spent most of her career working undercover, blending into crowds while observing behavior patterns. Her sharp mind and keen instincts made her exceptional at reading people, often spotting trouble before it even began. Today, however, she wasn't here for work. This was supposed to be a rare day off, a chance to focus on herself instead of chasing criminals or solving cases. Yet as soon as she entered the store, she couldn't shake the sense that something felt off. The first sign came almost immediately. A sales associate greeted her with a polite smile, but it didn't quite reach their eyes. "Good afternoon," they said, gesturing vaguely toward the back of the store. "Let me know if you need anything." Their tone was courteous enough, but there was a distance in their voice, a hesitation that suggested they weren't entirely comfortable having her there. Maria nodded politely, brushing it aside. She'd encountered similar reactions countless times before. People often assumed things about her based solely on the color of her skin, whether consciously or unconsciously. While it frustrated her, she'd long since learned how to navigate such situations without letting them ruin her day. She moved deeper into the store, browsing through racks of dresses and blouses. Each piece was more exquisite than the last, adorned with intricate details and price tags that could make anyone blink twice. Maria ran her fingers lightly over the fabric of a navy blue gown, admiring its craftsmanship. For a moment, she allowed herself to get lost in the beauty of it all, imagining how stunning it would look paired with silver accessories. But then she noticed him, or rather, her, Karen Miller, the store manager, standing behind the counter with her arms crossed. Karen was middle-aged, impeccably dressed in a tailored pantsuit, her blonde hair styled perfectly. At first glance, she seemed professional, maybe even friendly. But as Maria continued browsing, she realized Karen's attention kept drifting back to her. Not casually either. Every time Maria picked up an item to examine it, Karen's gaze followed her movements like a hawk tracking its prey. At first, Maria tried to ignore it. Maybe Karen was simply doing her job, keeping an eye on all the customers. That wouldn't have been unusual in a high-end boutique like this one. But the longer Maria stayed, the more intense Karen's scrutiny became. It wasn't just curiosity, it was suspicion. Maria could feel it radiating off her, heavy and suffocating. She knew that look well. It was the same look she'd received countless times before, the assumption that she didn't belong, that she wasn't good enough to be there. Karen finally approached her, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Hi there," she said, her voice overly sweet but lacking warmth. "Can I help you find something?" Maria turned to face her, maintaining her composure. "Thank you, but I'm just looking for now," she replied smoothly, meeting Karen's gaze with steady confidence. Karen didn't leave. Instead, she hovered nearby, lingering awkwardly as if waiting for Maria to slip up somehow. When Maria reached for a silk blouse hanging on a nearby rack, Karen cleared her throat loudly. "Oh, that one's very popular," she remarked, her tone shifting slightly. "It's part of our exclusive collection, only available to certain clients." Maria raised an eyebrow, sensing the underlying message. Was Karen implying she wasn't one of those certain clients? She decided to test the waters. "Exclusive collection, huh?" she said lightly, holding up the blouse. "Well, I guess I'll have to see if it fits." Karen's expression tightened ever so slightly, though she managed to keep smiling. "Of course," she said, her voice clipped. "Just let me know if you need assistance." Maria nodded, turning her attention back to the clothing. But Karen didn't walk away. If anything, she grew bolder, hovering closer and making comments about other items Maria touched. "That jacket is Italian leather," Karen said at one point, her tone dripping with emphasis. "Very delicate." Another time she mentioned how much a pair of shoes cost, as if warning Maria not to damage them. With each passing minute, Maria's patience wore thinner. She understood what was happening here. This wasn't about protecting merchandise or ensuring customer satisfaction. It was about control. Karen wanted to assert dominance, to remind Maria that she didn't belong in this world of privilege and excess. And while Maria had faced discrimination countless times before, it never stopped being exhausting. Still, she refused to give Karen the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. She continued browsing calmly, pretending not to notice the growing hostility. Eventually, Maria found herself drawn to a display case near the register. Inside was a stunning designer handbag, its sleek design catching the light beautifully. She leaned in for a closer look, admiring the craftsmanship. Without thinking, she opened the case and carefully lifted the bag out to inspect it further. That's when Karen pounced. "Excuse me," Karen snapped, her voice sharp enough to startle Maria. "What do you think you're doing?" Maria straightened up, clutching the handbag gently. "I'm looking at this," she replied evenly, refusing to be intimidated. "Is there a problem?" Karen's face flushed red. Whether from anger or embarrassment, it was hard to tell. "That bag is reserved for VIP customers," she spat, her words laced with venom. "You can't just touch it without permission." Maria blinked, momentarily, stunned by the audacity of the claim. There was no sign indicating the bag was off limits, nor had Karen mentioned anything earlier about restrictions. Clearly, this was less about policy and more about power. "I see," Maria said slowly, setting the bag down carefully. "And how does one become a VIP customer? Do I need to fill out an application, or is it based on other criteria?" Her sarcasm flew right over Karen's head. "I suggest you leave now," Karen hissed, pointing toward the door. "Before I call security." Maria took a deep breath, steadying herself. She knew better than to argue with someone so determined to pick a fight. But as she stood there staring at Karen's smug expression, she couldn't help but wonder how far this woman would actually go to prove her point. Little did Karen know, she was about to learn a lesson she'd never forget. Karen's demand that Maria leave the store hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and oppressive. The tension between them was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Maria stood still for a moment, her fingers lightly resting on the edge of the glass display case where the designer handbag lay. She could feel Karen's eyes boring into her, waiting for her next move. But Maria wasn't one to back down easily, not in life and certainly not in situations like this. "Let me get this straight," Maria said calmly, her voice steady despite the rising pressure in the room. "You're accusing me of what, exactly? Touching a bag without permission?" Her tone carried just enough skepticism to make Karen bristle. Karen crossed her arms tightly over her chest, her lips pressed into a thin line. "That bag is reserved for our VIP clientele," she repeated, enunciating each word as if speaking to someone who didn't understand basic English. "And you clearly don't qualify." Maria raised an eyebrow, her expression unreadable. "Interesting. I didn't see any signs indicating exclusivity, nor did anyone inform me of these so-called rules when I walked in." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "But even if that were true, how does picking up a bag constitute some kind of crime?" Karen's face reddened further, her frustration mounting. She glanced around the store, perhaps hoping another employee would step in to support her. But the few other shoppers milling about had begun to notice the commotion. their curious gazes flickering between Maria and Karen. Sensing she was losing control of the situation, Karen decided to escalate things. "I'm calling security," Karen announced loudly, pulling out her phone with exaggerated urgency. "This is private property and I won't tolerate theft or disturbances." The word theft hit Maria like a slap across the face. Theft, for simply looking at a bag. It was absurd, almost laughable. Yet she knew better than to dismiss it entirely. Accusations like this weren't uncommon for people who looked like her, black women unfairly labeled as criminals because of stereotypes perpetuated by ignorance and prejudice. What started as a simple shopping trip was quickly spiraling into something far more serious. Maria took a step forward, closing the distance between herself and Karen. "Before you do that," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade, "let's clarify something. I have no intention of stealing anything. I came here to shop just like anyone else. If you have an issue with my presence, fine. But don't insult my intelligence or your own integrity by making baseless accusations." Karen faltered for a split second, taken aback by Maria's composure. Most people in Maria's position might have panicked or become defensive, but Maria remained cool and collected. It was clear she wasn't going to be intimidated. Still, Karen refused to back down. Instead, she dialed 911, her fingers trembling slightly as she held the phone to her ear. "This is Karen Miller at Prestige Boutique," she said into the receiver, her voice shaking with indignation. "I need police assistance immediately. There's a suspicious individual in my store refusing to leave after being asked multiple times. She's attempting to steal merchandise." Maria listened silently as Karen painted a picture of her as some kind of criminal mastermind. Each word felt like a weight pressing down on her shoulders, but she refused to let it show. Instead, she turned her attention to the growing audience of onlookers. Some looked concerned, others confused, and a few appeared outright sympathetic. One older woman standing nearby gave Maria a small nod, her expression suggesting she understood exactly what was happening here. When Karen finally hung up the phone, she turned to Maria with a triumphant smirk. "The police are on their way," she declared, as though this somehow validated her actions. "You'll regret causing trouble in my store." Maria stared at her for a long moment, her mind racing. She could already envision how this scenario might play out. 2 officers would arrive, likely responding to Karen's description of a suspicious person. They'd see Maria, a black woman, and assume the worst, just as Karen had. It wouldn't matter that Maria had done nothing wrong. Appearances often spoke louder than facts in moments like these. But then something shifted inside her. Maria realized she had a choice. She could either allow Karen's racism and paranoia to dictate the outcome, or she could take control of the narrative. And deep down, she knew which path she needed to choose. Reaching into her purse, Maria pulled out her FBI badge. It gleamed under the boutique's bright lights, its golden emblem catching everyone's attention. She held it up for Karen to see, watching as the color drained from the store manager's face. "I think you should reconsider your story," Maria said evenly, her voice laced with authority. "Because when the police arrive, they'll want to hear both sides. And trust me, mine will be far more compelling." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. For the first time since the confrontation began, she seemed genuinely unsure of herself. What?" she stammered, her confidence crumbling. You're law enforcement?" "That's right," Maria replied, her tone icy. "Special Agent Maria Thompson, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Now why don't we wait for the officers together and explain exactly what happened here?" The irony of the situation wasn't lost on anyone, least of all Karen. Here she was, accusing a federal agent of theft while simultaneously proving herself guilty of racial profiling. The absurdity of it all was almost poetic. As the seconds ticked by, the tension in the room reached a fever pitch. Customers whispered amongst themselves, some openly criticizing Karen's behavior, while others watched in stunned silence. Minutes later, the sound of sirens echoed outside the boutique. Two police officers entered the store, their expressions cautious as they surveyed the scene. One of them approached Maria, his gaze flickering between her and Karen. "Ma'am, can you tell us what's going on here?" he asked, addressing Maria first. Maria nodded, stepping aside to give him a clear view of her badge. "Of course," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I'm Special Agent Thompson with the FBI. I was shopping here when the store manager accused me of attempting to steal a handbag. When I questioned her reasoning, she called you." The officer's eyes widened slightly, clearly caught off guard. He glanced at Karen, who now looked pale and flustered. "Is this true?" he asked, turning his attention to her. Karen hesitated, her earlier bravado completely gone. I thought she was suspicious," she muttered, avoiding eye contact. "She was touching things without asking." The officer frowned, glancing at the display case where the handbag sat untouched. "Did she actually take anything?" he asked pointedly. "No," Karen admitted reluctantly, her voice barely above a whisper. "And there's no signage indicating the item is restricted?" the officer pressed. "No." By now, Karen's defenses had crumbled entirely. She stood there, defeated, as the officers exchanged skeptical looks. One of them turned back to Maria and offered an apology. "Agent Thompson, we're sorry you had to deal with this. We'll handle the matter appropriately." Maria nodded, accepting the apology graciously. "Thank you," she said simply. Then turning to Karen, she added, "I hope this serves as a reminder that assumptions based on race aren't just hurtful, they can have serious consequences." Karen said nothing, unable to meet Maria's gaze. The crowd of onlookers dispersed slowly, many of them murmuring quietly among themselves. Some offered Maria supportive smiles, while others shook their heads in disbelief at Karen's behavior. As the officers documented the incident, Maria picked up the handbag once again, holding it carefully in her hands. She walked over to the register, placing it on the counter in front of Karen. "Ring this up for me, please," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. The sound of the cash register clicking open felt almost deafening in the tense atmosphere of the boutique. Karen, her hands visibly trembling, began ringing up the handbag Maria had chosen. Each beep of the scanner echoed through the store, punctuating the awkward silence that had settled over the space. Maria stood patiently at the counter, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp, watching every move Karen made as if to ensure there would be no further attempts to sabotage the transaction. For Karen, this moment was nothing short of humiliating. Just moments ago, she had been so certain of her authority, convinced that she was protecting her store from someone who didn't belong. But now, here she was, forced to serve the very person she'd accused of theft, a federal agent no less. The irony wasn't lost on her, though she lacked the courage to acknowledge it out loud. Her face burned with shame as she fumbled with the receipt printer, her usual efficiency replaced by clumsy hesitation. Meanwhile, the two police officers lingered nearby, observing the scene quietly. One of them, Officer Daniels, jotted notes on his notepad while occasionally glancing at Maria and Karen. His partner, Officer Ramirez, leaned against a display rack, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Both men seemed acutely aware of the delicate nature of the situation, careful not to say or do anything that might escalate tensions further. As Karen handed Maria the receipt, their eyes met briefly. For a fleeting second, Maria saw something flicker in Karen's gaze. Regret, perhaps, or maybe even fear. Whatever it was, it vanished almost instantly, replaced by the same defensive mask Karen had worn throughout the confrontation. She muttered a quiet thank you before stepping back, clearly eager to put as much distance between herself and Maria as possible. Maria tucked the receipt into her purse, then turned to address the officers. "I appreciate your professionalism," she said warmly, offering them a small smile. "Unfortunately, incidents like this are all too common for people who look like me. I hope this serves as a reminder of how harmful stereotypes can be, not just for those on the receiving end, but for everyone involved." Officer Daniels nodded thoughtfully. "We're sorry you had to go through this, Agent Thompson. We'll Make sure the report reflects everything accurately. He glanced at Karen, who was now pretending to organize items behind the counter. And we'll follow up with the store management to ensure proper protocols are in place moving forward. Maria appreciated the gesture but knew better than to expect immediate change. These kinds of biases were deeply ingrained in society, often perpetuated by systemic issues that couldn't be resolved overnight. Still, she hoped this incident might plant a seed of awareness, however small, in the minds of those present. With the purchase complete and the matter officially documented, Maria prepared to leave the boutique. As she walked toward the exit, several customers stepped aside to let her pass, some nodding respectfully while others whispered words of encouragement. "You handled that beautifully," one woman said softly as Maria passed by. Another man gave her a thumbs up, mouthing the word hero without saying it aloud. Outside, the late afternoon sun bathed the sidewalk in golden light, a stark contrast to the cold tension inside the store. Maria paused for a moment, taking a deep breath of fresh air. Despite the unpleasantness of the encounter, she felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Not because she had won or proven Karen wrong, but because she had remained true to herself throughout the ordeal. She hadn't allowed anger or frustration to dictate her actions. Instead, she had used the situation as an opportunity to educate and advocate for fairness. But the story wasn't over yet. Unbeknownst to Maria, someone in the store had captured part of the altercation on their phone. A young woman, standing near the shoe section during the heated exchange, had discreetly recorded Karen's accusations and Maria's calm rebuttal. Recognizing the significance of what she had witnessed, the woman decided to share the video online, tagging local news outlets and social media platforms. Within hours, the clip went viral. Viewers were captivated by Maria's poise and professionalism, marveling at how she had turned the tables on Karen using nothing more than her identity and composure. Comments poured in from across the country, praising Maria for handling the situation with grace while condemning Karen's blatant racial profiling. Hashtags like Nair FBI in the boutique and Nair Stand with Maria began trending, sparking conversations about discrimination, privilege, and accountability. Back at home, Maria scrolled through her phone later that evening, stunned by the sudden influx of notifications. Friends, colleagues, and even strangers had reached out to express their support, sharing memes and posts inspired by her experience. At first, she chuckled at the humor. Someone had photoshopped her FBI badge onto a superhero costume. But soon she realized the magnitude of what had happened. This wasn't just about her anymore. It had become a symbol of resilience and justice. Local news stations picked up the story, airing segments that highlighted both the incident and broader discussions about racism in retail spaces. Reporters tracked down details about the boutique and its management, uncovering past complaints filed by other customers who claimed they had been treated unfairly due to their race or appearance. The mounting evidence painted a troubling picture of systemic bias, prompting calls for change, not only within the boutique but across the industry as a whole. By morning, the boutique's reputation was in shambles. Social media users flooded the store's official accounts with criticism, accusing them of fostering a discriminatory environment. Influencers weighed in, urging their followers to boycott the brand until meaningful action was taken. Even competitors chimed in, using the controversy to promote their own commitment to inclusivity and diversity. Amid the chaos, Karen found herself at the center of the storm. Once confident in her authority, she now faced public scrutiny unlike anything she had ever experienced. Anonymous messages flooded her inbox, ranging from insults to threats. Colleagues avoided eye contact with her at work, and friends distanced themselves, unsure of how to react. Overwhelmed by guilt and embarrassment, Karen submitted her resignation letter the following week, citing personal reasons for her departure. For Maria, the aftermath brought mixed emotions. On one hand, she was grateful for the outpouring of support and the platform it provided to discuss important issues. On the other hand, she couldn't help but feel frustrated that such incidents continued to occur despite decades of activism and advocacy. It was exhausting to constantly fight battles that shouldn't exist in the first place. Still, she refused to let bitterness take root. Instead, she chose to focus on the positive impact her experience had created. When reporters contacted her for interviews, she agreed to speak publicly, not to glorify herself but to amplify the voices of others who had faced similar discrimination. In each interview, she emphasized the importance of empathy, education, and accountability, urging businesses to adopt policies that actively countered bias rather than perpetuated it. One evening, after a particularly long day of media appearances, Maria sat alone in her living room, reflecting on everything that had transpired. She thought about the countless individuals who had shared their own stories of being mistreated in stores, restaurants, and other public spaces. Their courage reminded her why she had dedicated her life to fighting injustice, whether in the courtroom, the field, or everyday interactions like this one. As she sipped a cup of tea, Maria smiled faintly. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference. And while she couldn't single-handedly dismantle centuries of prejudice, she could continue to stand tall, to inspire others to do the same, and to remind the world that dignity and respect should never be privileges reserved for a select few. The days following the viral video were a whirlwind for Maria. What started as a routine shopping trip had turned into a national conversation, with her at the center of it all. Social media buzzed with hashtags like #UnFBI in the boutique and Justice for Maria, while news outlets clamored for interviews. Friends, family, and even strangers reached out to express their admiration for how she handled the situation. Yet despite the praise, Maria couldn't shake the weight of what had happened. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about something much bigger. One morning, as Maria sipped her coffee and scrolled through her phone, she came across an article titled, "The Boutique Incident, a Wake-Up Call for Retailers." The piece dissected the events in detail, highlighting not only Karen's behavior, but also systemic issues within high-end retail spaces. Experts weighed in, discussing the prevalence of racial profiling in luxury stores and calling for reforms. Reading the article, Maria felt a mix of emotions: pride that her experience was sparking meaningful dialogue, but frustration that such conversations were still necessary in 2023. Later that day, Maria received a call from a local news station, inviting her to appear on a live segment. At first, she hesitated. She didn't seek fame or attention. Her goal had always been to focus on her work with the FBI and advocate for justice quietly. But after some thought, she realized this was an opportunity to amplify her message. If sharing her story could help others understand the impact of discrimination, then it was worth stepping into the spotlight, even if temporarily. During the interview, Maria sat poised and confident, dressed in a tailored navy blue blazer that matched her calm demeanor. The host began by asking her to recount the incident, which Maria did succinctly, avoiding unnecessary drama. When asked how she managed to stay composed during such a tense situation, Maria smiled slightly. "I've spent years training to remain calm under pressure," she explained. "But more importantly, I knew that reacting with anger wouldn't solve anything. My goal was to address the issue head-on, using facts and professionalism to make my point." Her words resonated deeply with viewers. Many took to social media afterward, praising her eloquence and grace. Some shared their own stories of being racially profiled in stores, echoing Maria's sentiment that these experiences were far too common. Others expressed gratitude for her willingness to speak out, saying her courage gave them hope for change. As the interview continued, the host asked Maria what she hoped would come from the incident. Her response was thoughtful and measured. "I want people to reflect on their biases, both conscious and unconscious, and consider how those assumptions affect others," she said. "This isn't just about one store manager or one boutique. It's about recognizing patterns of behavior that harm individuals and communities. We need accountability, yes, but we also need education. Businesses must prioritize inclusivity and ensure their staff are trained to treat every customer with respect." Her answer struck a chord, prompting widespread discussion online. Influencers and activists joined the conversation, urging retailers to take concrete steps toward reform. Within days, several major brands issued statements condemning racial profiling and pledging to implement diversity training programs. Some went further, announcing partnerships with advocacy groups to create more inclusive environments for employees and customers alike. Meanwhile, the boutique at the heart of the controversy struggled to recover. Sales plummeted as boycotts gained momentum, and negative reviews flooded websites like Yelp and Google. Customers described feeling unwelcome or judged based on their appearance, reinforcing allegations of systemic bias. Facing mounting pressure, the store's corporate headquarters released a formal apology, acknowledging past mistakes and promising to do better. "We regret the harm caused by our employees' actions and are committed to fostering a culture of inclusivity," the statement read. "To that end, we will be conducting mandatory diversity training for all staff members and revising our policies to prevent similar incidents in the future." While the apology was a step in the right direction, many remained skeptical. Critics pointed out that such promises often amounted to little more than lip service unless accompanied by tangible action. For Maria, the key question was whether the boutique and other businesses like it would follow through on their commitments. Time would tell. In the midst of the public discourse, Maria decided to visit the boutique again, not to shop, but to deliver a personal message. She arrived unannounced, walking through the door with quiet determination. The atmosphere inside was markedly different from her last visit. Employees moved about nervously, casting furtive glances in her direction. When Maria approached the counter, the new manager, a young man named Ethan, greeted her cautiously. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "How can I assist you?" Maria smiled warmly, disarming him with her kindness. "I'm here to talk," she replied simply. "Not as a customer, but as someone who cares about making things better. For everyone." Ethan nodded, gesturing for her to follow him to a private seating area near the back of the store. As they sat down, Maria began by commending the company's public apology and commitment to change. However, she emphasized that apologies alone weren't enough. "Words matter, but actions matter more," she said. "If you truly want to create a welcoming environment, you'll need to go beyond training sessions and policy updates. You'll need to listen to your employees, to your customers, and especially to those who have been marginalized." Ethan listened intently, nodding along as Maria spoke. He admitted that the recent backlash had forced the entire team to confront uncomfortable truths about their workplace culture. "We're trying to figure out how to move forward," he confessed. "It's not easy, but we know we have to do better." Maria appreciated his honesty and offered practical advice. She suggested forming focus groups with diverse community members to gather feedback, creating clear channels for reporting discriminatory behavior, and celebrating cultural diversity through marketing campaigns. By the end of their conversation, Ethan seemed genuinely inspired, promising to relay her suggestions to upper management. Leaving the boutique, Maria felt a sense of cautious optimism. Change wouldn't happen overnight, but she believed that small, consistent efforts could lead to meaningful progress. More importantly, she hoped her actions, both public and private, would encourage others to speak up when faced with injustice. That evening, Maria attended a dinner hosted by a local civil rights organization. The event honored individuals who had made significant contributions to advancing equality, and Maria was invited as a guest speaker. Standing before an audience of activists, educators, and community leaders, she reflected on the power of resilience and collective action. "This journey hasn't been easy," she admitted, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. "But it's reminded me of something important. None of us are alone in this fight. Every time we stand up against discrimination, every time we challenge stereotypes, we inspire others to do the same. Together, we can build a world where dignity and respect aren't privileges, they're guarantees." Her speech earned a standing ovation, leaving many in tears. As Maria stepped off the stage, she was greeted by hugs and handshakes from attendees eager to thank her. Though humbled by their gratitude, Maria knew the real heroes were the countless individuals who fought tirelessly for justice every day, often without recognition. Driving home that night, Maria allowed herself a moment of reflection. The past week had been exhausting, exhilarating, and everything in between. Yet through it all, she had stayed true to her values, using her platform to advocate for change. While the road ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, she felt hopeful. Hopeful that stories like hers might inspire others to stand tall in the face of adversity. Hopeful that empathy and understanding could triumph over prejudice. And hopeful that someday, no one would have to endure what she, and so many others, had experienced in that boutique. The days following Maria's visit to the boutique and her speech at the civil rights event brought a wave of renewed energy, not just for her, but for communities across the country. The viral video of the incident had sparked something powerful, a collective awakening. People from all walks of life were sharing their own stories of discrimination in retail spaces, workplaces, and public areas. Social media became a platform not only for outrage, but also for solidarity. Hashtags like #Stand Against Bias and Solid Inclusion for All began trending alongside Dar FBI in the boutique, creating a movement that extended far beyond one woman's experience. Maria found herself thrust into the role of an accidental advocate. Her inbox was flooded with messages, some thanking her for speaking out, others seeking advice on how to handle similar situations. A young college student wrote to her about being followed around a bookstore by staff members who assumed she couldn't afford the books she was browsing. An elderly man described how he'd been denied service at a restaurant because of his accent. Each story tugged at Maria's heartstrings, reminding her why this fight mattered so deeply. She responded to as many messages as she could, offering words of encouragement and practical guidance. One message stood out to her. A letter from a teenage girl named Jasmine. "I saw your interview," Jasmine wrote. "You made me feel less alone. I've always loved fashion, but every time I walk into a store I feel like people are watching me like I'm going to steal something. It makes me want to stop dreaming about working in design someday. Do you think things will ever change?" Maria paused after reading Jasmine's words. They resonated with her own experiences growing up, the constant need to prove herself, the weight of stereotypes that seemed impossible to shake. She knew exactly how Jasmine felt. Sitting down at her laptop, Maria crafted a heartfelt reply. "Dear Jasmine," she began, "your dreams are valid, and no one should make you doubt them. Yes, change takes time, but it starts with people, like you and me, refusing to stay silent. Keep pursuing your passion. You belong in any space you choose to enter." Jasmine's response came quickly. "Thank you," she wrote back. "Your words mean everything to me. Maybe one day I'll design clothes that celebrate diversity instead of excluding it." Inspired by these interactions, Maria decided to take her advocacy a step further. She partnered with a nonprofit organization focused on combating racial profiling in retail spaces. Together, they launched a campaign called See Me Not My Color, aimed at educating businesses and consumers alike about the impact of bias. The initiative included workshops for store employees, toolkits for customers to report discriminatory behavior, and a pledge companies could sign to commit to inclusivity. As part of the campaign, Maria traveled to several cities to host town hall meetings. These events brought together community members, business owners, and activists to discuss ways to create safer, more welcoming environments. At one meeting in Chicago, a local shopkeeper named Marcus shared his perspective. "I used to think treating everyone equally meant ignoring differences," he admitted. "But now I realize it's about celebrating those differences. I've started training my staff to see each customer as an individual, not a stereotype." His comment earned applause from the audience, and Maria nodded in agreement. "That's exactly right," she said. "Equality doesn't mean pretending we're all the same. It means valuing what makes us unique while ensuring everyone is treated fairly." The campaign gained traction quickly, drawing attention from national media outlets. Journalists praised Maria's efforts, calling her a beacon of hope in the fight against systemic racism. Even celebrities joined the cause, using their platforms to promote the "See Me, Not My Color" message. One actress wore a custom-designed t-shirt bearing the slogan to a red carpet event, sparking conversations among fans and industry insiders alike. Back at the boutique where the incident had occurred, changes were slowly taking shape. Following Maria's private meeting with Ethan, the new manager, corporate headquarters implemented several reforms. Employees underwent mandatory diversity training led by experts in cultural competency. Store policies were updated to include clear guidelines on customer interactions, emphasizing respect and professionalism above all else. Additionally, the boutique launched a mentorship program for underrepresented youth interested in careers in fashion, offering internships and scholarships to aspiring designers, stylists, and merchandisers. Ethan kept Maria updated on these developments, sending her regular emails detailing the store's progress. In one message, he shared photos of the first group of interns participating in the mentorship program. "These kids are amazing," he wrote. "They remind me why this work is so important. Thank you for inspiring us to do better." Maria replied warmly, congratulating him on the positive changes. "This is just the beginning," she reminded him. "Keep pushing forward, and don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it." Despite the progress, challenges remained. Not everyone supported the push for inclusivity. Some critics argued that initiatives like diversity training were unnecessary or even divisive. Others accused businesses of pandering to political correctness, rather than addressing real issues. Maria encountered these arguments frequently during interviews and panel discussions. Rather than dismissing them outright, she addressed them head-on, explaining that inclusion wasn't about favoritism, it was about fairness. "Think of it this way," she said during one televised debate. "If someone tells you they feel unwelcome in your store, would you ignore them? Or would you listen and try to understand why? Inclusion isn't about lowering standards. It's about raising expectations for ourselves, our businesses, and our society." Her ability to articulate complex ideas in simple terms earned her widespread respect. Even skeptics found themselves reconsidering their views after hearing her speak. Over time, the backlash softened, replaced by a growing recognition that change was necessary and possible. Amid the whirlwind of activism and advocacy, Maria made sure to carve out time for herself. She returned to the boutique where the incident had unfolded, this time not as a target of suspicion but as a celebrated guest. The staff greeted her warmly, many expressing gratitude for the lessons they'd learned since the controversy. Maria smiled, shaking hands and exchanging hugs. When she reached the counter, she noticed a framed photograph displayed prominently. It was a picture of her holding the designer handbag on the day of the incident, accompanied by a plaque that read, "A moment that changed us." "It's a reminder," Ethan explained, "of where we went wrong and how much farther we still have to go." Maria nodded, touched by the gesture. "Progress isn't perfect," she said, "but it's worth fighting for." Later that evening, as she sat alone in her apartment reflecting on everything that had transpired, Maria felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, frustration, and exhaustion, but it had also been incredibly rewarding. Through her courage and resilience, she had inspired countless individuals to stand up against injustice and demand better. And yet, she knew the fight was far from over. Discrimination wasn't confined to luxury boutiques or retail spaces. It permeated nearly every aspect of society. But Maria believed that every small victory brought them closer to a world where dignity and respect were universal rights, not privileges reserved for the few. As she turned off the light and prepared for bed, Maria allowed herself a quiet moment of pride. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference. And she was ready. Months had passed since the incident at the boutique, and life for Maria Thompson had settled into a rhythm that felt both familiar and transformed. The whirlwind of media attention, public appearances, and advocacy work had slowed, giving her time to reflect on everything she'd experienced. While the spotlight had dimmed, the impact of her actions continued to ripple outward, touching lives in ways she hadn't anticipated. One crisp autumn morning, Maria received an email from Jasmine, the teenage girl who had written to her months earlier about feeling unwelcome in stores because of her race. Attached to the message was a photo of Jasmine standing proudly beside a mannequin, dressed in a stunning outfit she had designed herself. "I did it," Jasmine wrote excitedly. "I entered a local fashion competition, and I won first place." They said my design celebrated diversity in a way they'd never seen before. "None of this would have been possible without your encouragement. Thank you for believing in me." Maria stared at the screen, her heart swelling with pride. She could see the care and creativity Jasmine had poured into her work. Bold patterns inspired by African textiles, layered with modern silhouettes that spoke to inclusivity and innovation. It was more than just clothing. It was a statement, a testament to the power of resilience and self-expression. Maria replied immediately, congratulating Jasmine and encouraging her to keep chasing her dreams. "You're proving that representation matters," Maria wrote. "Keep showing the world what's possible." Inspired by Jasmine's success, Maria decided to organize a community event celebrating young creators like her. She partnered with local schools, art programs, and businesses to host a pop-up showcase called Designing the Future. The event featured student-designed fashion collections, artwork, and performances, all centered around themes of identity, culture, and inclusion. Families filled the venue, cheering as young artists took center stage to share their creations. For many attendees, it was a reminder that talent knows no boundaries, and that nurturing diverse voices is essential for progress. Among the participants was Marcus, the Chicago shopkeeper who had spoken at one of Maria's town halls. He brought his teenage daughter, Sophia, whose photography project explored the beauty of everyday people in their neighborhood. "This is amazing," Marcus told Maria during a break. "Seeing these kids shine reminds me why we do this work. It's not just about fixing problems, it's about building something better." Maria smiled, nodding in agreement. "That's exactly it," she said. "We're planting seeds today so future generations can grow up in a world where they feel valued and heard." The success of Designing the Future sparked interest from other cities, prompting Maria to expand the initiative nationwide. With help from sponsors and volunteers, she organized similar events across the country, creating opportunities for young people to showcase their talents and connect with mentors in various industries. Each event reinforced her belief that change begins with empowering individuals to tell their own stories. Meanwhile, the boutique where the original incident occurred continued its efforts to become a model of inclusivity. Under Ethan's leadership, the store implemented a customer ambassador program, hiring employees from diverse backgrounds to serve as liaisons between shoppers and staff. These ambassadors ensured that every visitor felt welcomed and respected, regardless of their appearance or background. The boutique also hosted monthly workshops on topics like cultural sensitivity, implicit bias, and effective communication, inviting experts to lead discussions and activities. To mark the one-year anniversary of the incident, the boutique unveiled a mural outside its entrance. Painted by a local artist, the vibrant piece depicted hands of different colors reaching toward each other, symbolizing unity and connection. Beneath the image were the words, "Everyone belongs here." During the unveiling ceremony, Maria delivered a speech reflecting on the journey they'd taken together. "When I walked into this store last year, I didn't expect to leave with anything more than a handbag," she began, drawing laughter from the crowd. "But what happened inside those walls taught me, and hopefully all of us, an important lesson. Assumptions divide us, but understanding brings us closer. This mural isn't just art, it's a promise to keep learning, growing, and doing better." Her words resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom had followed the story since its inception. As applause erupted, Maria stepped back to admire the mural, feeling a sense of closure she hadn't realized she needed. Still, Maria knew there was much work left to be done. Discrimination wasn't confined to retail spaces. It existed in schools, workplaces, healthcare systems, and countless other areas of society. But rather than feeling overwhelmed, Maria found strength in the knowledge that small victories added up over time. Every person who stood against bias, every company that embraced inclusivity, and every child who dared to dream contributed to the larger fight for justice. At home, Maria often thought about the legacy she wanted to leave behind. As an FBI agent, she had dedicated her career to protecting others and upholding the law. Now, through her advocacy, she was helping to dismantle the barriers that prevented so many from living freely and authentically. Her two roles weren't separate, they were intertwined, driven by the same core values of fairness, integrity, and compassion. One evening, as she sat on her couch, flipping through old case files, Maria paused to consider how far she'd come. From undercover operations to viral videos, her life had taken twists and turns she never could have predicted. Yet through it all, she had remained true to herself, using her experiences to inspire change and uplift others. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a text from Jasmine. "Guess what? I got accepted into a fashion design program in New York City. I couldn't have done it without you. You've changed my life." Maria smiled, her chest filling with warmth. She typed out a quick response. "Congratulations, Jasmine. Remember, you're not just designing clothes, you're shaping the future. Keep shining." As she set her phone down, Maria leaned back and closed her eyes, letting the weight of the moment wash over her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference. And while the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, she knew she was ready, because every step she took, no matter how small, brought her closer to the world she envisioned. A world where everyone could walk into any space and feel like they belonged. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the hum of her apartment and the glow of city lights outside her window, Maria allowed herself a rare indulgence: hope. Hope that stories like hers might inspire others to stand tall in the face of adversity. Hope that empathy and understanding could triumph over prejudice. And hope that, someday, no one would have to endure what she, and so many others, had experienced in that boutique. With a deep breath, Maria opened her eyes and reached for her notebook. There were plans to make, ideas to explore, and lives to touch. The journey wasn't over. It was just beginning.